if you only have like purely tech optimists coming into this space, what you get is just like a lot of irresponsibly built technology, which actually is kind of what's happening in Silicon Valley right now, right? You need more people who are having this critical lens coming in and training themselves on how the technology works so they can explicitly say that this is what needs to be done, this is what needs to be coded in, this is what regulation needs to look like.
Hello everyone, welcome to Green I.O. I'm Gaël, and in this podcast, we empower responsible technologists to build a greener digital world, one bite at a time. On Tuesday, our guests from across the globe share insights, tools, and alternative approaches, enabling people within the tech sector and beyond to boost digital sustainability. In March, the Pragmatic Engineer newsletter asked its reader to share their experience of using AI tools. 95% of this audience, made up mostly of software engineers, use AI tools at least weekly. And 75% use AI for at least half of their software work. Sustainability-aware software engineers are part of this trend too. The difference is they know about the energy consumption. The International Energy Agency estimates the IT sector's energy use will double before 2030. And beyond energy, they also know about the overall environmental footprint of data centers powering generative AI tools such as carbon emission, water consumption, heat, and so on. Hence, a daily dilemma on the use of these tools versus their values. Natasha Ann Lum is no stranger to this situation, and being the co-founder of the RagTech podcast, a respected voice in IT sustainability and a software engineer working for the Singaporean government, she had the opportunity to speak about this tension several times. From her own perspective, she codes every day and with a nuanced yet critical approach on how developers use AI tools. In this episode, we went back to some basics of software engineering, discussed CI/CD, and debated about intentional AI, among other things. It is a discussion from which I learned a lot, and I'm sure you will too, as software practitioners. And now, here's my conversation with Natasha. Hello, Natasha. Welcome to the show. I'm also looking forward to seeing you emceeing Green I.O. Singapore this week. But first and foremost, thanks to taking an extra time to join us and to talk about AI and the dilemma of being a software engineer using it. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on this podcast finally, right? After 2 years of talking about it.
Yeah, and the fun fact is that, I still have it in the back of my mind. I think I will eventually, around March the 8th, at some point, manage to gather several, I would say, female vocals, speakers about gender inequity in tech and so on. And every time I was like, I need to have this episode about gender imbalance in tech and how actually it affects even sustainability topics. I'm like, and I need to have Natasha on the show. The problem is it's an episode that takes a bit time to coordinate. I wanted obviously someone based in Asia, based in Africa, based in Europe, maybe based in the Americas. And I'm like, and every time I'm like, no, it's too late now. So I think I'm going to do August 8th. And I would say, this is the exact opposite of March 8th.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Because you need to talk about this all the time.
Exactly. I would love to be in that episode, but for this episode, I'm excited to talk about my personal dilemmas as a software engineer who is also concerned about sustainability. We met way before the first Green I.O. conference began in Singapore. I mean, you basically held the first ever tech sustainability conference in Singapore. I'm not really sure how I met you, but somehow we met, and then I was speaking at a panel, but really it was through you that I found a community of equivalent practitioners who kind of also sat between that dilemma, right? Where there are people who are incredibly optimistic about tech, who knew the ins and outs of it, but also kind of knew in the background that there's huge sustainability implications, a diverse amount of solutions also to that. But, this problem and this niche is not being talked about. But with Green.io, with your podcast, you've given it a platform both online, and then now that you've brought it to Singapore and I guess to wider Asia, that becomes like a topic that we can converge on. So I'm really glad to be on this podcast and talk about how I personally have been navigating this dilemma now that, I've kind of been plugged into that community. Yeah, I guess for the audience, my name is Natasha. I'm a technical practitioner. I've been a career software engineer since 2021. I primarily work with public service. But before 2021, I was mostly doing coding in the academic space, where I was doing something called digital humanities, dealing with a lot of big data and processing it for the advancement of research. So yeah, I have been playing around with code, if you will, for a really long time. I think almost 10 years. But currently also started my own podcast, kind of like Gaël here. I have a podcast based in Singapore. It's called RagTech, where we're really trying to make tech news, tech explainers, and criticism about tech as well accessible to people both in the tech industry, adjacent to it, and also beyond. It's kind of like special in the sense that both myself and the other two co-hosts are real life people in tech. So we're still full-time technical practitioners, two software engineers and one solutions engineers. And we traverse across different industries. I'm in public service and the other two are in a mixture of fintech and startups. So that's kind of what I've been doing. So on these two fronts.
Thanks a lot for the kind words about Green.io. I'm really happy that you found yet another community. And if we had some positive impact in Southeast Asia, that's really great. You did a wonderful introduction. I wanted to mention the podcast because, yes, we are fellow podcaster. But as you said, you're also a practitioner. And this is really from this angle that you're going to talk today. And maybe just for the audience, albeit most of them are tech savvy, to understand the scale of the use of AI among software engineers. Recently, I read a survey from Gaël and Natasha, the one who writes a pragmatic engineer newsletter. And I think almost 1,000 of his subscribers answered about and shared their experience of using AI tools for work. As a software engineer, obviously 99% of them are software engineering reading his newsletter. And yeah, well, the key finding was like AI is now completely mainstream. I mean, 95% of respondents use AI tools at least once a week, if not more. And 75% use AI at least for half of their software. So I was really shocked. And I just wanted to ask you, are these orders of magnitude accurate according to your own experience? Is something that you can see in your daily job or via your podcast interview, because you kindly mentioned the RagTech podcast?
Honestly, I'm not surprised when you told me that statistic. 95% out of 1,000 software engineers using AI at least once a week sounds about right. In fact, I wouldn't, even once a week sounds kind of on the low end. What I've been seeing is that a lot of software engineers around me use it almost every single day. Not like for the full 24/7, of course, but I think it really depends on the level of autonomy you give to an agent. That tends to vary a little bit. You have some people who are just using it to bounce ideas through a chatbot like ChatGPT or like Claude, the chatbot, and they're just using it as an ideas bouncer. There are also people who are on more level 2, level 3, really diving into agentic software engineering, having these AI agents do the coding for them as they provide these goals. So I'm not surprised, but I think it would be great to have like a deeper survey to kind of see for the larger base of software engineers, at what level of autonomy are you using these AI tools? But yeah, on a personal level, what I see around me.
I was about to ask you the question.
Yeah. Personal level, as an individual, I use it every day. I'm not afraid to admit it. But because I'm okay sitting in this uncomfortable space of questioning both the whether it's really, should we be normalizing using AI coding every day? And also, like, what are the dilemmas surrounding it? And I think right now, even without me actively preventing myself from using it, I do find myself using it every day, both in work and also outside of work in my personal side hustles, including RegTech. And I also run a women in tech community, so that's for that as well. But in terms of like, how do I use it? I use it primarily for coding. I use a mixture of what I told you, more of the level one, where I bounce ideas off of like a chatbot assisted by AI. And I think it's really good for brain dumping ideas. I mean, we both run a podcast, so we're always like full of ideas, right? And these ideas are also disorganized. And I think a lot of these chatbots do a great job at reorganizing these ideas into something that is structured, so that you don't have to spend so much time just kind of consolidating these ideas. You don't have to find somebody who's someone who you can soundboard to. That software is just kind of available to you. And I find it really useful as somebody who's juggling so many different responsibilities, and I have new ideas pop up in my head all the time. And it's just so hard to grab somebody who's relevant and also emotionally available to hear me rant about stuff, especially when you're in a technical niche. So I find that really useful. And the fact that these chatbots also maintain a history of my conversations, it allows me to leave ideas there, have it neatly formatted, and then when I have a new idea in a week, I can come back to that same conversation. So that's one way that I use it kind of like on the go. And the other big primary way I use it is as a coding agent.
So you do go to level 2 and level 3, as you mentioned.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So, and also when I speak about these levels, these are not arbitrary levels that I created. Even in the space of AI, if you're talking about self-driven cars, they have this scale of level 1 to level 0 to level 5. Level 0 is just no AI assistance at all, where they have these levels to kind of benchmark how much autonomy they give to AI to drive those self-driving cars. And level 0 to 5 is that benchmark. When we're talking about it in the space of software engineering, I infer it to be, where level 1, you're using more of like the chatbot style. It's you prompt it for an answer and you talk to it kind of like a human, but it doesn't actually have agency to perform tasks for you. And then level 2 is it has agency to perform very specific tasks that you set it, like write this message in my email for me. And then level 3, which is what most of these big AI companies are trying to strive for excellence in, is in goal-oriented autonomy, where you give it a very broad goal and you tell it, like, I want to create an app that does this. Do whatever you think is necessary to do it. That's kind of like the level that I'm operating on, wavering between level 1 to level 3, depending on how I deem that specific thing I want to do, what level of expertise and autonomy I should assign to that coding tool. So yes, I do use level 2 to 3 a lot for coding and software engineering, both at work and also in coding related projects outside of work.
And about this level 3, what is the level of autonomy that you leave? I mean, do you have like a 20 pages description of the project, or were you more into skilling very precisely? Okay, I want you to be a software engineer doing A, B, C, like unit test, functional test, and all of this, or were you more on the skill side, on the description side? Do you implement reverse loop, feedback loop, for the agent to know about external tests and autocorrect itself? What is your, I would say, tech stack or AI-powered tech stack today? Just to understand better when we deep dive about the dilemma, which is what we're going to talk in 2 minutes.
Right. Okay, this is a great question, especially as I'm kind of diving into what does agentic software engineering mean. Agentic software engineering is so there's still so many questions we have to answer because it's not just vibe coding. And that's why I need to discern for our audience here, vibe coding and agentic software engineering are two different things. And it is still a problem that your big AI companies are trying to solve.
A quick word about the sponsor of this episode, Resilio. Resilio provides leading data, tools, and professional services to assess and reduce the environmental footprint of tech. As a Green.io listener, Resilio grants you a 1-month free trial access to their Resilio database, a search engine for the footprint of any IT equipment or services. Find the carbon or water footprint for tens of thousands of products in a click, and so much more. The link for this special offer is in the show notes. Full disclosure, I only accept partnership with companies whose services or initiatives I personally support or use myself. As usual, however, I'll let you be your own judge about these products. You're more on the agentic engineering, agentic software engineering rather than vibe coding. Hence, my question, my earlier question was that, so first of all, which tool do you mostly use? If maybe you use several, and how do you use them very concretely? Like, is it Claude? Is it Gemini?
Yeah, so I'm pretty agnostic to the tool, surprisingly, but right now for work, because it's provided by my agency, it's Cloud Code, and I know it's because they've done a really great job, like Anthropic, just kind of marketing the business model towards enterprise, right? So that's why a lot of people believe Cloud Code is great for the professional space, which, and I agree, it does a great job. But on a personal level, like I have experimented a little bit, and a lot of it, it's about optimizing both token usage and what I believe is better for software engineering. So I think using a coding agent that allows you to toggle between different models is a great start rather than sticking to one specific company and agent. Not just because like, hey, this agent is better than everything else, but also recognizing the political landscape, the business landscape, right? You also don't want to tie yourself to a specific tool, because they make you buy like 1-year subscriptions, right? To save money and all. But yeah, so I use Windsurf, but there's a lot, like I think Cursor is one of them. And I can kind of hover between different models to see what works for that specific problem.
Maybe it's time to talk now that we've laid the ground for massive adoption, and you also explain a bit how you use it in an agnostic way. But let's deep dive and let's talk about the elephant in the room. Once you wrote that you dream of using AI coding tools guilt-free, with no environmental cost from, and I quote you there, irresponsibly run data centers. What would that word actually look like in practice, and what's standing between us and it today? If you can develop a bit on your previous thoughts.
So I think I posted that on my LinkedIn, and this was shortly after I spoke at the AI Collective in Singapore. And I talked about, my dilemmas as a software engineer who can see the immense benefits that AI has brought, especially in the space, not only in software engineering, right? Like it also with all my side projects, I'm able now to devote more capacity to those projects as well, because it's really unlocked so much 10x engineer and just 10x productive person. But at the same time, because I'm a software engineer who also cares about society, I am not ignorant to its harms because I know exactly how it works, right? I have the privilege of having higher access to literacy and information about its harms than the layperson. So how do I navigate this dilemma then? I have this, I'm always in this in-between space that like, okay, we talk so much about agentic software engineering. So I'm like, hey, let's use Claude, let's do this, let's do that. But then like you mentioned, I know the context that's being fed into it, right? I know that in order to want to uphold, it's a good thing. Claude wants to uphold engineering best practices, ethics, the Claude constitution. And I also would want to put in a skills MD, a Claude MD, an agents MD to write down what I define as best practices over time. But then as an engineer, then, wait, all of these increases token usage. What does increased token usage mean? Okay, not so much of me paying more money. That's one side of the coin. But the other part is just that's the amount of compute needed on the inference side. And this all goes into a data center. And I also know that there are a lot of data centers that are not being run very responsibly because of the lack of regulations and also a myriad of other things. So where do I sit in there? But, in that same session, I was encouraging more people to step in this uncomfortable space of being like a user so that you can criticize and then improve the space, right? If you only have like purely tech optimists coming into this space, what you get is just like a lot of irresponsibly built technology, which actually is kind of what's happening in Silicon Valley right now, right? Because there are no active critics with that kind of power, including governments, who are actively not fighting, but like negotiating with big tech what these compromises are. You need more people who are having this critical lens coming in and training themselves on how the technology works so they can explicitly say that this is what needs to be done, this is what needs to be coded in, this is what regulation needs to look like. So going back to your question of what's standing between us and this dream of being able to use all these AI tools to boost productivity without having to like sit with that uncomfortable feeling of all the harms it causes. I think it's two things, regulation and tech literacy. Regulation is a big one, but oftentimes when I say regulation, then people are like, okay, so that's government, right? That's not my responsibility. No, that's not the case. And I think a lot of people have this kind of learned helplessness to them. They're like, we're not the ones in power, okay? So yeah, it's government's job. It's big tech's job, not my job. No, but the people actually have a lot of power and voice. We have just been so inundated by both our social media algorithms and also just entire capitalistic structures that have rendered us tired and powerless that we have learned that we're helpless against these systems. But really, you can voice it out. There have been so many instances of data centers being built in cities without the knowledge of residents. And I'm talking about the case of data centers that have no regard for the actual hidden costs of the land that they're using, of the water and the electricity.
The land, the water, the energy, and
correct.
So on.
Yeah, I'm sure you covered this in a lot of your different podcast episodes. But the thing is, once the residents knew, you're able to take it up to the state governors who they themselves surprisingly might not know about these costs. That was the case for a lot of them. People entrust government to know so many things, but we are in an era of information that things are moving so fast. Even your state officials and your governors, they don't know as much as you do. And you need to be that sounding board. People need to know that there are checks. They are also checks and balances for governments, and people need to work hand in hand to sound that out. And entire data center projects have been closed down because of residents. So people do have a voice.
The problem here is that I've heard about these projects being closed. I've heard about projects brute forcing their way into production, which happens quite a lot in countries where I would say democracy is not at its best, or where business interests are so strong with a so powerful narrative, like especially in the US, like we need to win the war in AI. I didn't know that we had a war in AI, and so we shouldn't prevent us for remaining the largest concentration of data centers and so on, blah blah blah, etc. Plus all this narrative about it's going to bring a lot of tax, a lot of wealth to the neighborhood, which is usually pretty untrue because a data centers doesn't create a lot of job, and it creates a lot of nuisance, and most of the time they come with a lot of tax breaks. So yeah, the balance is not that's good. But what I didn't see that much is the balance that you mentioned. Like, okay, we're going to create a data center, maybe slightly in Switzerland or in Sweden. Like, okay, we're going to reuse existing land, like former industrialized spaces which are today wasted, no agricultural land for obviously, and we're going to build it as responsible as possible. Maybe reuse the heat, making sure that we don't increase electricity price up to the roof, and so on and so on. I don't see that many examples. But okay, so that was my 2 cents on what you said. So you mentioned that we should not forget that we have a voice as a citizen, as a public actor. That's, I would say, part one of your analysis. What do we need, maybe, as software practitioner? If we pose this activist mindset needed, what are the tools? I mean, today, when you code, when you do software engineering, let's be precise with the word, with Claude, with Gemini, whatever, what are the tools that you would love to see and that you don't see today?
Okay, if we're talking about software engineers, surprisingly, even the software engineers have more knowledge than most about what's happening with the technology. A lot of them don't question. We're not kind of raised in environments to question very loudly to manage why is the business direction going this way. A lot of us, it's about like, okay, you've assigned me this ticket, this feature, this fix, this bug. I'll fix it. That's my job. But the questioning bit of the process, which is a lot of like modern software engineering culture best practices, agile culture, you've heard of it, right? That whole blameless culture, we're trying to like raise opinions without being blamed and judged for it. That needs to come in play even more so when, now companies are pushing for the use of agentic coding tools for software engineers. And how can this look like for a software engineer, right? First, you have to be able to critically look and be comfortable questioning these tools rather than think that Claude is the best, it's going to produce the best code. And management told me to use it. Wow, it's really coding faster than me. I have nothing to say against it. You look for the holes, always put on the devil's advocate hat and be a constructive skeptic. I always start with that. I'm always a skeptic first before an optimist. Sometimes like that labels me as aggressive at work. But, if I truly have the business interests in mind and the organization's interests and society's interests, I have nothing to hide. For example, if a company is pushing for agentic tools in software engineering and it's like, just use AI, and then a question comes like, okay, so what about the verifying that the AI hasn't encoded secrets and keys that we don't want released in production? I think you've seen a lot of the news. Oh, oops! This AI assistant released like this API key, that password out in the open. So this is a problem a lot of people are trying to solve. So usually, what these a lot of the solutions around the space, it's more about like, hey, you have to refine your prompt. You have to like insert it in the context to not do this. You have to like create a new Claude skill for it to scan the database, blah, blah, blah. And obviously the companies who own the AI will encourage you to do that, because by virtue of doing that, by virtue of adding more context, adding more like words to your prompt, adding more skills, you're using their technology more, you're using more tokens, you're paying more. So that's a great business model for them. But on a software engineering level, you have to stop and think to yourself, wait, like, is this the most effective and optimized way to solve the problem? When it comes to secret scanning, we know that like large language models are probabilistic. So even when you say like, guarantee me that you will not have any exposed keys, they can't guarantee you. Everything is a prediction. It's a probability. What's a 100% way to ensure this really doesn't happen? Automated mechanical tools. And those already exist predating AI. You have so many secret scanning tools that and it's actually code. It goes by a simple if-else logic. I scan the code base. If it falls within this regex pattern. Regex is basically a way for reading certain patterns in text. Like if, say, personal identifier in Singapore, we have NRIC numbers, ID numbers that start with S9 something. So you can write a piece of code that mechanically checks lines that has a certain number of characters, has this whatever, and then if it does, it flags it out, and it stops you from coding. So as an engineer, you have this knowledge, you have this ability to question, and now you can push back against your management and your product lead saying that we don't need to use a skill to do this. We don't need to add more context. What we should do instead is just make sure that our code base has this automated scanning tool.
Should we, or I guess the answer is yes, so I can be a bit more affirmative here, that it's a world of CI/CD now. We cannot ship code without proper testing. And as you say, mechanical testing. I think many of the questions and many of the challenges that I face and what I read in the news are like, but don't they implement proper CI/CD? And at least continuous integration, not maybe deployment, but at least continuous integration. We have so many tools testing, as you say, the quality of the code. Is it well documented? Is it safe? That I'm wondering if we're not forgetting regular best practices, of course, performance tests and so on. Okay, well, let's ask Claude or whatever the tool to do it, and everything will be fine, and we will add skills about be performant, be accessible, be secure, etc., etc. Yeah, maybe, but we can also not forget what we've done for the past 50 years in IT, which is automating a lot what we produce to make sure that when we release it in production, it's pretty safe. So is it something that you do a lot? Do you use a lot of a CI/CD tool when you ship code, or what is your tech stack?
So that's dependent on organization, and probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to speak of my on behalf of my organization. But most organizations will have some form of CI/CD pipelines. But when I say most, it's to varying degrees. Even so continuous integration and continuous deployment is still a relatively new principle, right? Development ops as a whole is actually still quite nascent. I think it came out like mid-2000s. And before AI, people were still trying to get most companies to adopt these best practices, to beg them like, hey, can you please, instead of like delaying till the end of the year and only pushing to production once and then realizing like, wow, everything is crap and everything's breaking. Let's create this pipeline. This is still a new paradigm, and people were still halfway through adopting it. I don't think we have passed that mass adoption curve, actually, for most organizations.
Maybe I'm biased because the companies I used to work with, they were very advanced, and I've been one of the CTO pushing for it. So I tend to see everyone with a pretty strong CI/CD pipeline. But what you're telling me is that, hey, Gaël, hold on, that might actually not be the case.
It is not as prevalent as most people think it to be. I think coming from the side of both public service and also having seen small, medium enterprises, the adoption rate is still very varied, and people are still kind of like in the middle of implementing it. Even while implementing it, it's not like the full scale implementation, right? Yeah, sure. An easy step would be go on GitHub, go on GitLab, and then they'll have these automated pipeline tools. But, especially in large organizations that have a lot of legacy systems and legacy procurement, right? Where you have to like fight tooth and nail with management to get, hey, let's procure like this tool and then like implement it in a pipeline. Tool by tool, you have to go through 1 to 2 years worth of procurement. That's why it's still taking a long time to fully migrate to these fully automated deployment and testing environments. And when we're still in the middle of that, then AI comes in. And you're absolutely right. Now, because we're using AI tools to code more and more, and we have fewer guarantees of code quality and code safety, because they work in a probabilistic fashion. Even more so, we need these automated guardrails. So when you talk about people having only adopted those tools halfway in the middle and then AI comes in, it pushes that needle back, actually, because people are like, wait, then we don't need to navigate that procurement bureaucracy. Instead, let's just make it scale. Let's just do this. It's so much easier, And you're absolutely right that there seems to be a trend of people kind of becoming complacent with AI coding tools and forgetting regular best practices. But even more so, we need to remember what these best practices are. And one of the personal philosophies around what structured agentic software engineering looks like for me is to prioritize automation versus agent autonomy. That is a huge difference. You can use an AI coding agent to code up a mechanical automation. Go back to the secret scanning thing because it's an easy example. I prioritize the solutions that use mechanical automation, these if-else statements, over giving the agent autonomy to do that task. So in this case, as a software engineer trying to decide between the solutions, you can use the AI coding tool to code up like a code scanning tool. That's fine because you're only doing it once, right? You use the AI coding tool once, and then this mechanical tool just runs forever with every commit. You don't use up tokens. So sustainability-wise, great. But when you instead encode it in an agentic skill, where every time you code, you tell the agent, okay, run another agentic process to scan it. It's eating up tokens every time, which in the end like ends up using compute every single time. And that's how you see like that exponential rise in compute. That's why people are facing like all these token increases too per usage. So those are the things that we can do.
And Natasha, let me pause here because I think you're touching on something that I wanted to ask you about, which is your intentional AI philosophy. Is it right that you build systems, you don't build code with AI agents? Can you elaborate a bit? Because when I read about it, I was like, oh, actually, I want to understand better what she means by building system, never generate the same thing twice in building system instead. Is it exactly what you described, or you want to explain a bit more about it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This kind of falls into the broader paradigm of thought that I kind of just coined intentional AI. Some people are fighting over me for that term because there's no such thing as intentional AI. It's disingenuous. And I'm like, again, like this is, me sitting in an uncomfortable space and trying to find solutions. And, what I mentioned, prioritizing automation versus agent autonomy in structured agentic software engineering, that is a manifestation of that philosophy around intentional AI, where one of these rules that I've set for myself is that to build systems over like one-off code. It's the whole engineering versus code. And it's not just for software engineering, it's for whatever you do as well. So for example, if you find yourself frequently using ChatGPT or Claude to clean up your email for I don't know, a lot of pauses, like sentence structure or punctuation errors. Every time you use you use more compute, more tokens. But if you think of it in a very systematic way, where you're looking at your emails and you see that frequently, you have the pattern of using exclamation marks over full stops, and you would like to be more professional. You don't have to, in a systemic way. Then instead, what you can do is to create a system that takes that and replaces all the full stops, all the exclamation marks with full stops in a very mechanical way. You use AI to create that system that does this parsing of your email and then returns it for you. So every time you do this, it doesn't use AI, So that's kind of like what I mean by focus on using AI to build these systems rather than AI itself being your system.
It's really interesting because it seems that you tend to move away from the probabilistic structure of generative AI, and that you use it actually to escape it and to build predictable system back again, what you call the mechanical approach. Okay, that's quite cool. And actually, if I try to wrap up a bit what you said, from the professional landscape, I will park we are all citizens and we still got some leeway to move things in the right direction. But as professional, what you mentioned is basically A, good old CI/CD works, and B, automate the system. If I create a system of automated things rather than relying all the time on AI tool and probabilistic tool, is there also some stuff that you would like to see from providers? I mean, we've seen with Hugging Face, for instance, let me give an example, that some of the model that they display on their huge place, I don't know, I can call it a marketplace, but a place, have now this energy score. I find it useful for picking up some models. But the truth is, what I would love to see is when I'm prompting, when I'm opening a project, what is the energy? Just to start, not even mentioning carbon or water, but just the energy or even maybe the amount of token. Is it a need, or do you think that this is not where we should think about or footprint, like when you actually use these agents having a sort of a, a visual saying, hey, this is the amount of token, this is the amount of energy, real energy, because, hey, we know where the stuff has been run eventually at some point if we map it with electricity maps or whoever the carbon, and being able to say, okay, I got this project went already to a few kilowatts or even more. Maybe I should pay attention to it. Or do you believe this is not really where we should nudge people and nudge ourselves on how to use AI more sustainable? In a more sustainable way, sorry.
That's interesting. I don't know Hugging Face was exploring putting your energy coefficients inside each model. I think like for this, it might get a little bit too complicated for the layman and kind of deter people. Like if they keep seeing all these numbers for a while and it doesn't make sense for them, people just kind of start closing one eye to it. I think the basic principle is if you can take that model from Hugging Face and you can completely run it locally in your computer, which most models are able to do that, like just run it on pure CPUs. You're fine because by it running in your own server rather than like some other cloud hosted server, you yourself are paying for the electricity. There are no hidden costs. You yourself are like, there's no water use in your own like computer, is there? It's its own cooling unit. So I'm more for like the decentralization of compute. I know this is sounding kind of like blockchain and then like all that, but the principle still stands. Like right now, the issue is that we are centralizing compute. We are centralizing AI infrastructure. And when all these things are centralized, it's starting to look a lot like a monopoly of sorts. But the problem is AI and tech infrastructure, while they're looking like natural monopolies, governments currently have no way of regulating like one. At least for your public grid infrastructure and all of that, governments recognize it. It's a natural monopoly. So I'm going to slap regulation that helps level out the effects to society. Great. But then for your AI companies and all these data center infrastructure, because it's all like cross-border, governments have not found a way to regulate and scale. So all these negative externalities are not being like realized, And so these companies are just like, because of that centralization, they're just taking all the benefits of a monopoly without like compensating the society for it.
A quick note, Natasha and I mentioned Green.io Singapore, which is happening this week. The good news, there are many other Green.io conferences, starting with New York next month. Green.io listeners can use one of the 30 free tickets using the voucher Green.io VIP. The link is in the show notes. Don't miss the opportunity. And now, back to our episode. Hey Natasha, welcome back. So we had a little technical glitch. You were mentioning that you believe that it shouldn't be on the individual burden to take decisions regarding energy. And also a very interesting thing that you mentioned is that you want to relocate computing, which is sort of similar to other industries where we see the sustainable move also to be a move where we dismantle things and we relocate things. I'm obviously thinking about agriculture, but also industrialization. Do we really need to build things that will be that we have to be shipped half around the world, just like toys or whatever? And I'm not even mentioning the food chain. I think maybe it's time to do the same with computing and say most of the time we should run our things locally. By locally, not maybe on our desk, because obviously there are so many reliability options and continuity services, but making sure that, we don't over-centralize things. Am I wrapping up properly what you said previously?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I do believe like we have normalized so much centralization of software for this the idea of economies of scale. But actually, now that we have AI tools at our disposal, it's democratizing both knowledge and the ability to customize software for yourself. So no longer do we need to depend on these economies of scale of generalized software. We can now create our own local solutions that tailor to our very specific needs without the boilerplate of generalizing for other people's needs, you see? So, I talked about compute being overly centralized. You only have that few companies who are running cloud infrastructure. I'm talking about Microsoft through Azure. I'm talking about AWS through AWS Cloud. And then you have Google Cloud. These are your main three players. And I think even more so with the current state of geopolitical turmoil, countries should look to localize and centralize to localize as much infrastructure as they can for things regarding data sovereignty. You don't want your citizens' data, your government data, public data, being technically owned by other companies whose headquarters are not at yours. So that's one reason. It's more than just energy and compute as well. It's about sovereignty.
Sorry to interrupt you. Is it something that is actively done by the Singaporean government, or do you still rely a lot on external providers, as you mentioned?
Singapore does rely on a lot of external providers. We're a really small country, and while we have local talent, we don't really have our own cloud infrastructure. Like we don't have a provider like AWS that provides for Singapore. While we do have like companies that have like their own on-prem servers and all of that, I think we have had a huge like push for AI. We literally have four national AI missions that was announced in the budget, and now everybody's scrambling for AI. But we don't really have our own local frontier models because we haven't been developing that yet. And I think that is a cause for concern. But the good thing about the Singapore government is that it does recognize these problems. And because we've always been like a country dependent on global trade and everything, this is not a new problem, but rather like it requires a consortium of a lot of different people, both technologists, policymakers, people who are familiar with foreign policy and how to define those protections for people like that. Those are things in the works. But as far as possible, I think the philosophy of trying to localize as many things as you can, especially when it pertains to software, that is still a wise move because you don't want to be cut off from all of these resources, just like you don't want to be cut off from energy and water, right, in your own country because you depend on another country. This is Singapore's main problem when it first started, right? We didn't have our own resources, our own land, but somehow we invented new water. We invented a way to reverse osmosis like our wastewater so that we could drink it. And this was in the early days. I know a lot of data centers now are currently like working with governments to do that for the purposes of data centers, but predating all of that, Singapore was already doing it for survival. So we need to use the same lens to look at software. How can we localize and develop like a large language model that comes from data from our own country rather than like it be riding off the backs of people in the global south? And honestly, this also has repercussions and impact when it comes to how we interact with these AI tools because it's not trained on Southeast Asian culture and ideology. You're going to get responses that are more Western leaning. Like, for example, the concept of a lot of Singaporeans do live with their parents for a really long time, right? And maybe somebody is using, I don't know, ChatGPT to consult. And I have facing some friction with my parents. ChatGPT, if it adopts a lot of that Western culture, will just tell the individual, move out. You don't need to deal with this. Cut them off. But is this really resonant with Singaporean culture? Whereas if it was trained mostly on local data, and then we actually put in the resources to create more of this data generated by our own people, then we don't need a constitution to define what ethics means globally. We can start infusing our own local ethics, culture, morality into these local LLMs. So many ways about this, but the main concept is we should be like questioning the centralization of all these software resources. And people are not questioning enough. I think that's the problem.
Natasha, I think We wanted to make it short and we didn't manage, as usual, I would say. Is there one last piece of positive news or just a topic that you really want to stress before that we close the podcast?
I think my message to everyone is to allow yourself to sit between an uncomfortable space where two truths can exist at once. Where the two truths in this case is that AI can make you incredibly productive. It can improve your cognitive thinking. It can give you so much access to learning and skills. But at the same time, there are very real harms. It can take away your ability to think. It can also take away from a society's resources. It can be very unethical in the way that it mines for this data, in the way that it takes advantage of the global south. And these two things can be true. You have to will yourself to be able to go past the binaries that we've kind of put ourselves in. And honestly, it's a systemic thing, right? Social media, because of the echo chambers and because of algorithmic binaries, it's packed us into two sides where people feel like, oh, you are a hypocrite. So many people have said that I'm a hypocrite for criticizing AI and tech while at the same time being a user and benefactor of it. But the thing is, I am making that difficult choice of sitting right here in the middle so I can criticize it and create solutions for it and be here today in this podcast to tell you new philosophies and new ways of working that I've discovered. But the thing is, I can't be the only one doing this. You can't be the only one doing this. We need people of all different walks of life so that you can insert your own very unique worldview into this. If you're in the nursing specialization, then you need to take part of this. Go and experiment to see how AI can help you, but also put on that constructive skepticism hat and think of but if I do this, and if I let AI do this, what does this mean for my patient's privacy and stuff like that? So nursing, and if you're education space, do that. Think about okay, if I let my students use ChatGPT, it's great. They're able to do their homework better, maybe, but does this mean they're relegating? Question it. So yeah, that's what I want to encourage people. It's not so much of an optimistic note, but rather more of again, a philosophy of making yourself comfortable to sit in between two truths at once. So you can criticize and improve society for the better for it.
It's not being hypocritical, it's being actually quite brave to embrace the two sides of a very difficult dilemma that we're facing. So thanks a lot for providing all those insights and nuanced approach on this pretty big topic from your hands-on perspective, because you're a daily practitioner of both AI and software engineering. Natasha, we mentioned your podcast, we mentioned your Women in Dev initiative. I guess quite a lot of people might want to reach out to you. How should they do? Where do we find you?
Yeah, you can reach out to me through my podcast. Just find RAGTECHDEV. That's our handle for YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, everywhere. And then our emails are there as well. So yeah, just feel free to reach out.
And I will put obviously the link in the show notes as usual. Well, Natasha, that was a packed episode. That's going to be fun to edit. And not asking an AI tool to do it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for taking time to edit it.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining the podcast. Thank you for joining this week Green.io Singapore in being the MC of the conference day. Yeah, I think we're moving slightly but surely things in the right direction in Southeast Asia because of all these little initiatives that you, I, and plenty of others. So that's a very positive note I would like to end on. Thank you again, Natasha.
Yeah, thank you so much. Looking forward to Green.io Singapore.
Thank you for listening to this Green.io episode. I think Natasha made her point on how to navigate the dilemma of being a software engineer using tons of AI and being aware of its environmental footprint. I hope this episode was useful for you to maybe go back to some basics and also think from a wider perspective, almost philosophical at some point, I would say. As usual, because accessible and transparent information is in the DNA of Green.io. All the references mentioned in this episode are in the show notes. More information also on our website, as well as the full transcript. The website is greenio.tech. Huge thanks to everyone who made this episode possible, starting with our partner, Good Gosh Media, and our executive producer, Russell Becker, and of course, you, my dear fellow responsible technologists. Let's keep on building a greener digital world together.
One bite at a time.